Hello, welcome to our new teaching series. Our first set of lessons is going to be Bible history. Now, at this point, we will usually kind of give you a context of where the lesson ties in with the big picture. But lesson one is the big picture. We're going to be doing Bible history overview. A good place to start with reference is right where you are. So here you are, and you are just after the year 2000. I'm recording this in 2026. So here we are, and if we jump back 2,000 years, we've got the Lord Jesus. Now, these dates, they're going to be approximate. Okay, and that really helps us remember it, these big dates. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be inaccurate, but when we use these dates, it helps us get it into our brain. And this is the whole purpose of this video. We're going to get all of Bible history to be able to fit in our brain. That's the goal. And so here's our overview. We're starting 0. That's where the Lord Jesus is. Now, if we go back to 2000 BC, there's Abraham. So the same distance, roughly, after Christ, that's where we are, to before Christ, that's where Abraham is. Okay, so we can remember 2000 AD, that's us. The Lord Jesus is at 0, Abraham at 2000 BC. Now, you go the same distance back to 4000 BC, and that's where we have Adam. Okay, so we've reached the beginning of biblical history. Now, if we jump right in between Adam and Abraham, so at this point we've been moving in chunks of 2000. So we're at just after 2000 AD, back to Christ at 0, then 2000 BC, and then 4000 BC. But if we sit right in the middle at 3000 BC, so that's a 1,000-year chunk, we've got Noah. Now, these are real nice because these are all major Bible characters. Adam, Noah, Abraham, and then we jump between Abraham and the Lord Jesus at 1000 BC. We have King David. Okay, so with just learning 5 major Bible characters, Adam, Noah, Abraham, David, and the Lord Jesus, you have context in a timeline for the years, this timeline of biblical history. Okay, here's a little way to remember these 5 in order. Okay, number 1, right, that's the first man. Right, number 1, the first man, that's Adam. You go, you hold up your second finger, and it's like you're pointing. This is like Noah pointing to the ark. Hey, we need to go on the ark. Okay, so that's number 2. So first guy is Adam. Second one's Noah. The third finger, that's your tallest. We remember Abraham was told out of him would come this great nation. He'd be the father of many nations, right? So the tallest finger, we think of our great finger, a great nation. Then we go to our ring finger, the royal ring, the royal signet ring. This is the royal one. This is King David for number 4. And then number 5, we have our humblest little tiny baby finger, the pinky finger. And the humblest, of course, is the Lord Jesus, who will be the greatest in the kingdom. So that's just a quick, easy way to remember these 5 major characters. Now remember, that's every 1,000 years. So 4,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000, and 0. However, when we're talking about Bible history, most of Bible history sits between Abraham and the Lord Jesus. In fact, these first 2,000 years between Adam and Abraham are covered in just the first 11 chapters of the Bible. Genesis 1 to 11 covers those first 2,000 years. Then from Genesis 12, when Abraham is introduced, all the way to the end of the Old Testament, that covers the second 2,000 years. So if you ever want to impress someone, read the first 11 chapters and tell someone that you have read half of the Old Testament. And timeline-wise, that is completely true. So we can see the emphasis in the Bible is on Abraham and his family. Okay, and so let's zoom in on this. Abraham, again, is at 2000 BC, and David is at 1000, but we want to get a little bit more specific, so we're going to jump to chunks of 500. And once again, we've got a major Bible character. Moses is sitting perfectly between Abraham and David at 1500 BC. Then, if we go from David to the Lord Jesus, that last 1,000 years, we've got Nehemiah. And so, again, we've got these chunks. Now, how do we remember these? We can see big transitions in each of these 500 years. So, from Abraham to Moses, we go from a family to a nation. So, Abraham starts, it's just him and Sarah and his his servants and people who live with him. But then it's the story of Abraham and then Isaac and then Jacob and then his 12 sons. So it focuses in on a family, father to son to grandson to great-grandsons. And those are the patriarchs. But then when we get to Moses, at the start of Exodus, we have a nation, a large nation made up of these tribes of Israel. Then from Moses to David, we go from a nation to a kingdom. They go from Moses and Joshua, they get into the land, they split up, and then they have the judges, but then we have, of course, the time of Saul and David, and we have this kingdom that with a capital, and we have that big change. Then from David to Nehemiah, the kingdom descends, falls into sin, and then they go into captivity, right? Until Nehemiah comes and the people are led out, the captivity time is over, and he leads one of the groups back to the land. And then the last 500 years, we have that restoration where the people come back to the land. And then the years of silence. Remember, these last 500 years, 400 of them are silent. So they're just the three minor prophets, the last three minor prophets that deal with the people after captivity. But then we have 400 years of silence. So this, again, gives it to you in a snapshot. If you can remember these major Bible characters and these gaps, you can draw this timeline. Then as you learn more about the Bible history, Bible stories, you have a little bit of context. Does this fit between Moses and David? Does it fit between Noah and Abraham? Where does this fit? And you can build from there. Now, if you want to dive deeper with Bible history, here are a few suggestions. Number one, read Genesis 1 through 11. These are going to be our next two episodes. Again, you're reading half of biblical history, or at least Old Testament history, with just these 11 chapters. So this is where we're going to go to next, first from Adam to Noah, and then from Noah to Abraham. But we have a much smaller amount to zoom in on there. So that would be a good next step to get this first chunk in your head. Then number two, read the history summaries. Remember that most of biblical history has to do with Abraham and his descendants, this family of Abraham, which is the bottom part of this timeline. So the first one is going to be Genesis 15. God speaks with Abraham and he tells him from what's going to happen for the next 500 years, how his descendants are going to go into captivity, but then they're going to come back to the land. Okay, so he tells him this history. Well, then the second one, God speaks with Moses in Deuteronomy 28 to 30, and he talks about how they'll go into the land and how they'll go away from God and they'll go into captivity. So he covers the next 1,000 years all the way up to the captivity. Well, then God speaks with Daniel, and he talks about that next chunk of history all the way until the Messiah. And then, of course, the Lord Jesus, he talks on his second Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 24 and talks about Israel's history in a future day. So these 4 passages, God outlines the history before it's history. In prophecy, he gives these history outlines. So those are some excellent scriptures to note down, to read through, to give this big picture overview. And then number 3, try to redraw this from memory. This short little video, it's helpful. Go back through, watch it again, and see how well you can sketch in these major characters and the years. Do it a few times, share it with a few people, and then it will lock it into your brain.